Hey everybody, and welcome back to the StarCityGames.com Invitational here in Baltimore. I'm Joey Pasco here with Brian Kibler, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Brian is playing in, hopefully Standard.
This would be an ambitious legacy deck, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. So, yeah, tell us about your deck.
But yeah, so I'm playing the Naya pseudo-pod deck that I actually featured this week in both my video and article on StarCityGames.com. And the idea behind this deck is that it's just a powerful, aggressive deck. Has a lot of strong, both early and mid-game creatures that uses Birthing Pod not as sort of a focus of the deck, but just as a powerful card. Since Birthing Pod has so many synergies with cards like Blade Splicer and Huntmaster.
So what exactly are you expecting to see today, and what are your best matchups?
I think the deck that is going to be most popular among the top players is Delver. Delver is a deck that has been among the top decks in the format since the format began, or really since Delver evolved as a deck, really. And it sort of takes a back seat every now and then because people just want to play different decks in part, and also because some decks emerge that are powerful against it. But then as the format shifts a little bit, the decks that people forget about Delver. People, are sort of, they're tuning their decks to beat, zombies and this and that. And Delver is just a deck that's always good, and that it, has a lot of play to it, which is the sort of thing that a lot of the top players really like. One of the reasons that I like this deck in particular is actually Thalia.
Yeah. And
Thalia is a card. I was actually basically just thinking about what's the best card in Standard against Delver decks.
And you asked that on Twitter.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I was looking for. At that point, I had an answer in mind, but I got the idea for Thalia basically from playing in the Legacy Grand Prix, where there's tons of decks which look a lot like Delver because they're basically
some
legacy.
Of them are playing Delver.
Right, they're basically legacy versions of the Standard deck or vice versa.
Right.
And Thalia, I was playing green-white there, and Thalia was one of the best cards against them because it can basically choke these decks on mana because they're based around all these cheap spells that help them find the right cards, help them find their mana. They're playing 20, 21 lands.
Right.
So if you play a turn 2 Thalia against them, they're in some serious trouble. So I wanted to play an aggressive deck that could support Thalia, and this was sort of the shell that I'd been building around with a bunch of different stuff for a while, and sort of came to the realization that Thalia would be very good here because there's so few spells.
Over the last few weeks on the Open Series, we've seen a lot of decks kind of going big. We've got Esper Control showing up. We've got Esper Control showing up. We've got the Junk Walkers deck. 15 Planeswalkers in the deck. You feel like you have a pretty good matchup against both of those kind of strategies?
There too. These are very spell-heavy decks. These are decks that rely on using things like Rampant Growth, Sphere of the Suns to accelerate their mana, using things like Lingering Souls or various Planeswalkers and stuff. All of these are slowed down by Thalia, and even in addition to Thalia, the deck's just a solid aggressive deck to begin with.
Right.
One of the cards that really jumped out at me from Lucas Blohan's NayaPod deck from PT Barcelona. I actually tested with him, and much of the shell of this deck is actually built around that same deck. In particular, the mana base, which includes Gavany Township.
Okay.
Gavany Township's a card that I think it got a lot of attention early on when the green-white decks were doing very well after the initial release of Innistrad, but it's sort of fallen out of favor as green-white as an archetype hasn't really been nearly as popular, in part due to Gutshot. Gutshot's a lot less popular. It's at least it's not a 4 of in the Delver decks these days. So the mana creature Township decks are much better equipped to win those sort of matchups. And Township's just such a powerful card against decks that you spend any amount of time just sort of playing draw go against.
Right.
If you just have 2 mana creatures in play and you have a Township, you're just getting farther and farther ahead the longer it goes. And now imagine you have a Blade Splicer with a token and a Huntmaster with a token. It just gets harder and harder for your opponent to pull out of this position because you're generating such an advantage every single time you activate Township. It also works very, very well with werewolves because not only do you get both the Huntmaster and the wolf with the counters, but you get to flip your Huntmaster because you didn't play a spell. You get to flip your Daybreak Ranger because you didn't play a spell. So it's I just found there's a lot of just powerful internal synergies here that really give the deck an edge.
Tell us about your sideboard.
So the sideboard here, one of the great things about playing Naya is you actually get to play with both Ancient Grudge and Ray of Revelation.
Right.
Those two cards are just so powerful. I think people really underestimate just how good they are. I think people know how good Grudge is basically because they've played Affinity against Grudge.
Right.
But people don't recognize just how good Ray of Revelation is. In Honolulu, we almost splashed white in our ramp deck, for both Alistar and Ray of Revelation, because Ray is just so good against humans.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, against playing this deck against humans, they have to deal with your things like Huntmaster and whatnot with Oblivion Ring. Then they're using on the Pure to pump their team. Just drawing a Ray of Revelation is so powerful against them. And then in particular, if you draw Ray of Revelation and Daybreak Ranger, my buddy here, Daybreak Ranger is again, I think a card that, obviously a card that I really like,
right.
But I think a card that's actually very well positioned right now because there are a lot more decks like Birthing Pod. You see a lot of Birthing Pod type decks. These are the sort of decks like Birthing Pod and Humans are the sort of decks that I had sort of anticipated being strong in the format when I was thinking that Daybreak Ranger was going to be such a good card. And you don't really see nearly as much ramp as you did before. You don't really see nearly the same amount of the sort of Solar Flare style control decks. So it's really, I think, a field in which Daybreak Ranger can be very powerful.
I see the Combust in there.
There's one Combust basically because I want to have a tool to take out Hero of Bladehold or to kill a Champion of the Parish before it gets really big. It's also having a single Combust that I can bring in against Delver decks, especially ones that have Dungeon Geist. I think it's nice to have a bit of removal. I had two for a while, but I need to make space for other things. In particular, Hero of Bladehold. The Hero of Bladehold in my sideboard is primarily just a concession to the possibility that people might still play ramp decks.
Okay.
Hero of Bladehold is one of the best cards you can play against them because Slagstorm, Whip Flare, they don't kill it. So if you're able to actually play a Hero of Bladehold, especially with acceleration, you can actually get out far enough ahead that you can kill them even if they do play tight.
So looking over the list, what deck don't you want to see?
Ramp is the deck that I think is the worst matchup for me.
Okay.
Just Hero of Bladehold gives me a bit of an out against their sort of basic plan, but I think that it's sort of the fundamental matchups of sort of in Magic, the way that the decks match up. The deck that goes like slightly bigger than you is always the one that's its favorite. You either want to be a lot faster than someone so you can beat them before their major game plan comes online, or you want to be slightly slower so what you do trumps what they do. And that's the position that Ramp is against my deck. My deck is sort of a mid-range creature deck, which I think gives me a really good shot against Delver decks, against zombie decks, given that I have the right tools to deal with them. But against decks like Ramp, they are just like that much more powerful than me. So when everything matches up, they end up winning.
Great. Well, good luck in the tournament this weekend, and thanks for sharing your deck. We'll catch up with you later.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
And we'll be back in a bit with more coverage from the StarCityGames.com Invitational in Baltimore.